weekend crawling over 4 different mine dumps on Upper Michigan's Keweenaw Peninsula, looking for native copper, detolites, and greenstone with limited success. Today, speaking for 5 to 7 minutes, he will be speaking to us about tax reform. The title of his speech is, How Much Candy is Good for You? Please help me welcome Earl Netwal.
Thank you, Erica, and fellow Toastmasters, and welcome guests, Skylar and Ben. Who likes candy? If I offered you some candy, you probably would accept it. And today, actually yesterday, the Republican Big Six have offered us all some candy. Now the question is, will we get a tummy ache from that candy? The topic is vast, and I have 5 to 7 minutes, so we will just do a minor review. First off, I'd like to ask, how many people think they pay too much taxes? Well, that seems like not everybody, but we tend not to like to pay taxes, so that's a given. The tax rate has changed over the years. The tax policy in the nation has varied significantly over its history. What we tend to focus on is the top tax bracket. That's just part of the equation, but we'll just focus on that right now. In 1944 through 1951, the top tax bracket in the United States was 91%. 91%, that's confiscatory. In 1952 and 53, it actually went up to 92%, and then back from 54 to 63 to 91%. Now I had Econ 101 from Walter Heller in the cavernous Northrop Auditorium, and he talked about when he and John ran the government. Speaking of JFK, there was a big first significant tax decrease, and the top tax rate went from that 91% down to 77% at 64, and then to 70% from 1960 to 1981. Still a high rate, significantly high taxes on the upper bracket income. Ronald Reagan came in 1982 and slashed that top rate from 70 to 50%. Now, that set off an economic boom of sort. But what most people might not remember is that 2 months after that, Reagan regretted the cut. He regretted the cut. In fact, over his term, there were 12 tax increases that recouped over 50% of that overall tax cost during his 2 terms in office. Now, there were a number of other manipulations, and actually the total tax rate for the highest bracket ended up at the end of his term at 38.5%, much of which was done in a revenue neutral basis by spreading the base, meaning the lower tax brackets paid more, so that the Treasury was relatively equal. Subsequently, there was a tax cut when, lost my place. In 1991, George Bush, the read my lips president, increased the tax bracket back up to 39.6%, where it pretty much has remained due to a number of variations up and down over the years. The bottom line is the tax bracket has been reduced significantly, and 2 significant increases, the Kennedy increase and the Reagan increase, were seen to have bolstered the economy. The question is, did they pay for themselves? And the answer appears to be, by every serious study, no. The Urban Institute study suggests that for every $1 decrease in tax cuts, that the various tax benefits to the economy were between 10 and 40 cents to the gross national product. So there just becomes a question that needs to be asked as Congress, as we, the American people, hear this debate spread out, do tax cuts pay for themselves? Last administration, the Republican Party seemed to be focused on deficits and about the national debt. It now appears that they want to do a $5 trillion tax cut, and the question is, how are they going to pay for it? Guess what, Minnesota? One of the ways that they're paying for it is by taking out one deduction. Not the mortgage deduction, not the charity deduction, but the deduction for state and local taxes. Who's that going to hit? Blue states. It is a partisan attack on blue states. We should be talking to our Republican representatives in Minnesota and just see how much they really want to increase the taxes of Minnesotans. Eric Paulson, I think you should be asked that. These are serious issues. Now, I'm not opposed to significant parts of the proposed tax increase. I do believe that corporate taxes should be lowered and the deductions that they have should be eliminated, and that so that all corporations are an even keel. I, on the other hand, am adamantly opposed to the idea that we should get rid of what they call the death tax. The death tax is an inheritance tax. They use that term pejoratively. Less than 0.2% of estates fall under the estate tax, and there's some peculiarities that Mr. Bingham in particular, and maybe several others of you who have been in real estate and understand what a tax-deferred exchange is. Too technical to get into, but at some point in time, it is appropriate that capital gains be paid by everyone if they're going to be paid by anyone. And there are ways in which in real estate you can trade one property into another, folding over the gain down the line with the theory that ultimately it gets paid in the estate tax. Well, for years Republicans have gotten rid of that little loophole, and yet the capital gains treatment of tax-deferred exchanges remain, and for me that's just an absurd situation. Another element of the tax proposal that has merit is the effort to repatriate dollars from overseas into the United States. To me, that makes sense. We should try to get those dollars back into the economy, and that one thing could genuinely stimulate the economy, and I think it should be pursued. So I'm not against, quote, tax reform or tax changes, but we need to think about some of the details. Initially, the president came out with a 2-page tax proposal in broad forms. Yesterday's proposal, with wide margins and large type, came out to 9 pages. A lot of details are yet to be disclosed. We need to have tax policy debated, not just in terms of the Republican Party interior, but we need to have action by the entire Congress. We need to take a serious look at elements. Do you realize that they increase the personal deduction, which everybody benefits from? The highest to the lowest taxpayer will benefit from it. But the lowest tax bracket, the one that affects everybody that makes over $24,000 a year, goes up 20%, from 10 to 12%. There are some details, many details, that we need to be paying attention to. And we as citizens need to demand that it be done in a bipartisan way, that they have hearings on it, Unlike the healthcare episode, we need to participate, and we as citizens need to get our oar in the water, particularly as Minnesotans, but beyond that, just as Americans, we need to be saying what we think and participating. I can guarantee you that we would all disagree in this room as to what is the best tax policy, but we should be involved in that debate and discussion, and I encourage you to give it more than passive interest. This matters to the future of our nation in many ways. We have already a full employment economy. If there's all of a sudden a huge burst of growth, which we seem to like, what's that going to do to interest rates, to the inflation rate? How does this all work out in the final analysis? My guess is 5 years from now, we will rue the day some of this happened, if it happens as proposed. Now, Toastmaster.